There's a moment that breaks a person. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. It happens in the middle of an argument where you suddenly stop recognizing yourself. You walked into the conversation calm. Certain. Prepared. You had the screenshots. The dates. The contradictions. The memories that still kept you awake at 2 a.m. And somehow, 30 minutes later, you are apologizing. Not because you were wrong, but because they made reality feel slippery. And if you've ever experienced that, then you already know something terrifying. Some people don't manipulate by controlling facts. They manipulate by controlling your nervous system. That's the part nobody warns you about. Modern society teaches people to fear obvious monsters. The screaming ones. The violent ones. The aggressive ones. But Machiavelli understood something far darker centuries ago. The most dangerous people rarely look dangerous. They look calm. Reasonable. Polite. They smile while they erase your confidence one sentence at a time. And today, that behavior is everywhere. In relationships. Families. Workplaces. Friend groups. Even online culture itself. We now live in a world where performance matters more than truth. Where appearing good matters more than being good. Where people rehearse empathy while privately feeding on control. And maybe the most exhausting part is that victims often leave those conversations feeling guilty for noticing the manipulation at all. So in this video, we're going to talk about something deeper than narcissism. We're going to talk about psychological control. Why confronting narcissists almost never works. Why logic actually gives them more power. And the one quiet question that exposes them without forcing you into another exhausting war. But more importantly, by the end of this video, you'll understand something most people never realize. The real victory is not getting them to admit the truth. The real victory is finally seeing the game clearly enough to stop playing it. And near the end, I'll show you why silence terrifies manipulative people more than anger ever will. Because once you understand that, you stop becoming emotionally available to people who survive by draining others. Most people think manipulation looks dramatic. It doesn't. Usually it starts small. A sentence. A smirk. A slight change in tone. You bring up something that hurt you. And instead of discussing it, they study you. That's the unsettling part. Narcissistic people often treat conversations like psychological surveillance. They aren't listening to understand you. They're measuring your emotional weak points. Maybe you tell them something bothered you. Immediately they laugh lightly and say, "You're too sensitive." Not aggressive enough to sound cruel. Just enough to make you question yourself. And if you defend yourself, now you're emotional. If you stay calm, now you're cold. Notice the trap. The outcome was decided before the conversation even started. This is why arguing with narcissists feels spiritually exhausting. Because you're trying to solve a problem, while they're trying to preserve control. Those are two completely different conversations. And once you see that, you begin understanding something Machiavelli understood long ago. Powerful manipulators never fight on equal ground. They shift the terrain itself. That's exactly what narcissists do psychologically. You think the argument is about honesty. But suddenly it becomes about your tone. Your memory. Your emotions. Your reaction. Your issues. Now you're defending yourself instead of discussing the original problem. And that confusion. That mental fog afterward. That's not weakness. That's cognitive overload. It's what happens when someone intentionally destabilizes your perception while pretending to communicate normally. The frightening part is that society rewards these people. Especially today. Modern culture rewards image management more than inner integrity. People learn how to appear emotionally intelligent without actually becoming emotionally accountable. They learn therapy language without developing empathy. They say things like, "I'm setting boundaries," while emotionally punishing anyone who questions them. They say, "You're projecting," while actively manipulating reality. They weaponize self-awareness language to avoid self-awareness itself. And if you've dealt with someone like this for long enough, you know the exhaustion isn't just emotional. It becomes physical. You start rehearsing conversations in your head before they happen. You over-explain simple things. You panic over your wording. You begin speaking like someone trying to survive interrogation instead of someone trying to communicate. That's when you know the relationship stopped being healthy a long time ago. Because healthy relationships don't make you afraid of ordinary conversations. The hardest part for many people is accepting that narcissists often know exactly what they're doing. Not always consciously, but strategically. They understand emotional leverage instinctively. They know guilt works. Confusion works. Silence works. Withdrawal works. One day they shower you with attention. The next day they become distant and cold. Not because they changed emotionally overnight, but because unpredictability creates dependency. Casinos use the same psychological principle. Intermittent reward. Random validation creates addiction faster than consistent affection. And suddenly you aren't chasing love anymore. You're chasing emotional relief. That's why people stay trapped so long. Not because they're weak, but because the nervous system becomes conditioned. Your body starts craving moments of peace from the same person creating the chaos. That contradiction destroys people internally. Especially men. Because many men were raised believing emotional pain should be hidden. So instead of talking about manipulation, they internalize it. They become quieter, more numb, more emotionally disconnected. Not because they're calm, but because they're exhausted. And modern society rarely notices male emotional collapse until it becomes catastrophic. A man can be psychologically drowning for years while still showing up to work smiling. That's why silent authority matters. Because there are millions of people silently carrying emotional warfare nobody around them can see. And maybe you felt this too. The strange loneliness of being emotionally damaged by someone everyone else thinks is charming. That isolation changes people. You stop trusting your instincts. You stop trusting your memory. Eventually, you stop trusting yourself. That's the real goal of manipulation. Not winning arguments. Ownership of perception. If they control your perception, they control your reality. Now here's where most people make the mistake. They think exposure changes narcissists. It doesn't. In fact, direct confrontation usually strengthens the cycle. Because narcissists are incredibly adaptive under threat. The moment they sense accountability approaching, their survival system activates. Suddenly they become the victim. Or the misunderstood one. Or the wounded one. Or the exhausted one, trying their best. Notice how quickly the roles reverse. That reversal is intentional. Because emotionally healthy people seek resolution. Manipulative people seek position. One wants peace. The other wants advantage. And when you don't understand that difference, you keep walking into emotional ambushes expecting honesty. That's why facts rarely work. Evidence rarely works. Logic rarely works. Because narcissists don't experience conversations as truth-seeking. They experience them as dominance contests. And once you understand that, everything starts making sense. Why they interrupt. Why they change topics. Why they bring up unrelated mistakes from years ago. Why they suddenly cry when cornered. Why they accuse you of exactly what they're doing. Projection is one of the oldest manipulation tactics in human history. Accuse others before they accuse you. Machiavelli would have recognized this instantly. Control the narrative early. Destabilize the opponent emotionally. Maintain moral appearance publicly. The terrifying thing is, modern social media amplified this behavior globally. People now curate identities instead of building character. Public virtue became more important than private integrity. And narcissists thrive in image-driven environments. Because perception is their oxygen. That's why exposing them publicly often backfires. They've spent years mastering performance. Many victims underestimate this. They think truth automatically wins. But in emotional politics, presentation often wins first. Truth arrives later. Sometimes far later. And that realization hurts. Because good people want fairness. Manipulators want leverage. Those are not the same thing. So eventually you reach a breaking point. You stop asking, how do I make them understand? And you begin asking, what are they really afraid of? That's the moment your perspective changes. Because narcissists are not terrified of anger. They're terrified of exposure without emotional access. Meaning, they panic when they can no longer emotionally control your reactions. That's why calm detachment unsettles them so deeply. Especially when paired with one dangerous thing. A precise question. Not emotional. Not explosive. Not theatrical. Just accurate. And the question is this. What would you have done differently? Simple. But psychologically devastating. Because the question quietly corners them. Think about it carefully. If they answer honestly, they admit wrongdoing. But narcissists survive through self-protection. Their identity depends on maintaining innocence, superiority, or victimhood. So accountability threatens the structure holding their ego together. But if they refuse to answer, they expose avoidance. If they attack you instead, they expose defensiveness. If they blame you, they expose projection. If they laugh it off, they expose emotional immaturity. No matter how they respond, the mask slips. And the power of this question is subtle. You are not accusing. You are observing. That difference matters. Because emotional reactions feed manipulative people. But calm observation destabilizes them. That's why delivery matters more than wording. You don't ask this question angrily. You ask it almost peacefully. Like someone no longer trying to win. That emotional neutrality changes everything. Because manipulators expect emotional chaos. When chaos disappears, their script collapses. And suddenly they don't know who controls the conversation anymore. But here's the deeper truth. This question is not actually designed to expose them. It's designed to wake you up. That's the real purpose. Because many victims are still unconsciously hoping for something impossible. The perfect confession. The perfect apology. The perfect moment where the narcissist suddenly becomes emotionally honest. But most of the time, that moment never comes. And waiting for it keeps people emotionally trapped for years. Sometimes decades. The question helps break the fantasy. You finally see the pattern clearly. Healthy people reflect. Manipulative people redirect. Healthy people pause to consider impact. Manipulative people pause only to strategize. That distinction changes your life once you recognize it. Because now you stop chasing emotional closure from emotionally unavailable people. And maybe this is the hardest lesson adulthood teaches. Not everyone wants peace. Some people want control disguised as connection. That realization can make the world feel colder at first. But strangely, it also makes life clearer. Because once you stop trying to rescue toxic people from themselves, you recover enormous emotional energy. You stop rehearsing arguments in the shower. You stop obsessing over explanations. You stop needing everyone to understand your side. That freedom feels unfamiliar initially, almost uncomfortable. Because many people were conditioned to believe love means endless emotional labor. But real love doesn't require psychological survival tactics. Real love does not punish honesty. Real love does not make you afraid to speak carefully. And real strength is not becoming emotionally hard. It's becoming emotionally clear. There's a difference. A hard person stops feeling. A clear person stops abandoning themselves. Silent authority is about that difference. Not revenge. Not ego. Not domination. Clarity. Emotional discipline. Internal stability in a culture addicted to performance and emotional manipulation. And maybe that's why silence becomes so powerful. Not passive-aggressive silence. Not punishment silence. Peaceful silence. The kind that comes from no longer needing to prove reality to someone committed to distorting it. That silence terrifies manipulative people. Because your emotional reactions were once their access point. When you stop reacting predictably, they lose psychological grip. That's why narcissists often escalate when you detach. Not because they love you more suddenly, but because control is fading. And people addicted to control panic when they lose access. You'll notice strange things happen. Sudden guilt trips. Sudden affection. Sudden emergencies. Sudden emotional speeches. Sometimes even sudden vulnerability. Not always fake, but often strategically timed. Because when manipulation stops working, they try different doors. That's why emotional discipline matters. Not coldness. Discipline. The ability to observe behavior without immediately drowning inside it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Most people hear that quote as motivation. But in relationships, it becomes survival wisdom. You cannot control manipulative people. You cannot force integrity into someone terrified of accountability. But you can control your participation. And that changes everything. Because the moment you stop emotionally feeding the cycle weakens. That's the paradox narcissists never expect. Your power returns quietly. Not through fighting harder, but through disengaging intelligently. So if you remember anything from this video, remember this. The goal is not exposing narcissists publicly. The goal is exposing the truth privately to yourself. That's the liberation. The moment you stop needing their confession to validate your reality, you become dangerous to manipulation. Because now your peace no longer depends on their honesty. And maybe that's the deepest form of freedom adulthood offers. Not controlling others. Not winning every argument. Not proving your worth. But learning who deserves access to your emotional world. And who only knows how to consume it. So the next time someone twists reality, the next time they make you question your instincts, the next time they try turning your pain into your guilt, don't chase the argument. Don't explain endlessly. Don't beg for understanding. Just stay calm. Look them in the eye. And ask quietly, what would you have done differently? Then watch carefully. Because their answer will tell you everything their mask was trying to hide. And sometimes, the clearest truth you'll ever receive is not in what someone says, but in what they cannot answer.